All right, let's just jump right into it. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we are unpacking a massive, literally high-stakes legal and environmental showdown that's unfolding right now in the Dakotas. We're looking at a complete forensic takedown of the April 2026 North Dakota lease sale. This is a story where original 19th century presidential land grants are colliding head-on with modern federal regulations, billions of gallons of water, and some record-breaking corporate cash. It's a fascinating look at how the rules of the ground beneath our feet are actually written and right now fiercely contested.
So, to get us started, I want you to imagine something for a second. You own a piece of land, maybe your house sits on it. Now, who controls what happens underneath it? If you're thinking, well, I do, the reality of this dispute might actually shock you. We're looking at a situation where historical private ownership is essentially at war with multi-million-dollar federal energy leases. To make sense of this whole showdown, here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at patents and split estates. Second, the financial lease incentives. Third, the April 2026 lease sale. Fourth, the Cougar-Brines bill. And finally, the procedural legal conflict. Let's get going.
Section 1. Patents and split estates, the historical context.
Okay, to really grasp the legal arguments flying around today, we kind of have to look back at what critics and our sources are calling the Great Severance. Back in 1862, under the Homestead Act, the president issued land patents granting fee simple ownership. You owned it all right down to the center of the earth. But by 1920, the government realized the immense value of oil and gas, and they started leasing it instead. Fast forward through the creation of the BLM to 1976, and modern management plans took over. Today, opponents in this audit argue that these modern plans act as fraudulent, regulatory patents that illegally overwrite those original 1800s presidential rights.
And that brings us to the absolute core issue we're examining today, the split estate. Basically, it's real property where the surface is owned by one entity, like a private rancher, but the mineral estate beneath it is held by someone else, very often the federal government. The sources note that the vast majority of BLM-managed oil and gas activity in North Dakota happens exactly this way. It's on private land where the feds control the subsurface.
So what happens if the federal government gives a lease the green light, but you, the private surface owners, say absolutely not? Well, enter a mechanism called forced pooling. Under North Dakota Century Code 38-08-08, an operator can legally pool minerals into a drilling unit even if the landowner straight up refuses to sign a lease. The legal audit we are reviewing points out that opponents view this as a legalized seizure. In fact, critics in the filings are literally calling this a communistic theft of private land rights, allowing corporate operators to just override property rights once the BLM approves it.
Moving on to Section 2, the financial lease incentives. Follow the money. So why the sudden, super aggressive corporate rush for these federal lands? Well, it all comes down to this number right here, 12.5%. According to the legal filings, the recently enacted One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or OBBBA, slashed the federal royalty rate down to 12.5%. This dramatic reduction makes every single acre of these federal leases exponentially more profitable for operators. It literally created a gold rush mentality overnight.
But here's the thing. OBBBA didn't just slash costs, it entirely changed the rules of the game. Our sources quote the legal protest directly, arguing the RMP is the ceiling, not a floor, for lease terms and conditions. OBBBA strips BLM of the sales-specific discretion to impose protective stipulations. What this means is the BLM can no longer add new, site-specific environmental protections during individual lease sales to address local issues. Opponents argue this closed a vital environmental safety valve, putting corporate access way ahead of local protection.
And wow, did the market react. In January 2026, driven by these wildly profitable new conditions, Devon Energy set an all-time federal record by bidding $218,751 per acre for a single parcel in New Mexico. The opposition uses this hard data to show that the BLM is facing massive, unprecedented financial pressure to push lease sales through as fast as possible, maximizing revenue while allegedly skipping careful environmental oversight.
All right, Section 3, the April 2026 lease sale, Dakota's under the gavel.
This intense financial pressure brings us chronologically right to the specific event at the center of this whole dispute.
Let's look at the hard numbers of that April 28th auction. It generated over $44.3 million in total revenue, selling off 23 federal lease parcels covering nearly 9,000 acres. And Devon Energy, yep, the same company setting those national records, was a dominant player here too, paying upwards of $10,000 per acre in North Dakota alone. The financial drive to execute this particular sale was absolutely immense.
Now, to legally execute that massive $44 million sale on April 28th, the BLM had to issue a specific regulatory document. It's called a FONSI, a Finding of No Significant Impact. By signing this, the agency officially concluded that leasing these 9,000 acres would not significantly affect the quality of the human environment. They basically declared the impact minor or negligible.
Which brings us to Section 4, the Cougar brine spill, the environmental conflict.
Okay, here is where the legal audit drops what the sources call a materiality bomb. Just weeks before the BLM signed that paperwork declaring no significant impact, a major event happened. On March 31st, an equipment failure at a site known as Cougar 1, specifically facility ID 5826, resulted in a toxic spill. According to the exact emergency release report cited in the audit, 99 barrels of toxic brine fluid were left unrecovered in the soil right within the project area. Opponents in the filings actually claim the BLM rubber-stamped that FONSI just to cover this up.
The opposition's legal filing lays out this forensic accounting of what they term the freshwater destruction potential. It's basically a mathematical threat matrix, based on scientific dilution ratios where literally just 1 gallon of Bakken oil requires 1 million gallons of water to safely dilute. Those 99 unrecovered barrels represent a staggering threat. When you add the brine and the oil estimates together, the opposition mathematically outlines a massive potential environmental impact.
16.6 billion gallons of water. Let that sink in for a second. That is enough to supply the entire population of North Dakota, over 800,000 people, with a full year's supply of fresh water. This is the exact environmental reality the opposition argues was just sitting there in the soil when the federal government gave the lease sale the green light.
Finally, Section 5, the procedural legal conflict, arbitrary and capricious.
So this is the exact moment where those 19th century land rights and these modern financial motives just violently collide in court. On one side, you have the BLM's stance. They issued the FONSI on April 28th, moving forward with the sale based on their prior environmental assessments, treating it as business as usual. On the other side, the opposition's argument. They claim the March 31 Cougar spill was a material change to the environment. Under federal regulations, specifically 40 CFR 1502.9, they argue this legally mandated the BLM to halt everything and perform a supplemental environmental assessment. They claim the agency was essentially selling damaged goods using outdated paperwork.
But wait, there's more. The legal audit also exposes another alleged procedural failure. The opposition claims the BLM deliberately skipped mandatory visual impact reviews, specifically Form 84004 visual contrast ratings. And get this, they point out this missing paperwork happened for leases situated just 3.5 miles away from the 70,000-acre Theodore Roosevelt National Park. The critics argue this clearly shows a deliberate rush to cash in on those record bids, skipping crucial field checks that might have slowed the whole process down.
The legal challengers really sum up their whole attack with this exact accusation from the filings. The BLM signed a FONSI while 99 barrels of toxic brine remained. To claim this is not significant is arbitrary and capricious. By using the specific legal phrase arbitrary and capricious, the challengers are attacking the very foundation of the BLM's decision-making. They're arguing that the agency prioritized corporate revenue and slashed royalty rates over their strict, mandatory duty to protect the land and the surface owners.
Which leaves us with this final, really provocative thought. When an original 1800s private land patent comes face-to-face with a modern, multi-million-dollar federal energy lease, fueled by slashed royalties and backed by the immense, overriding power of forced pooling, which right truly holds the ground? The outcome of this North Dakota legal showdown could honestly redefine property rights and environmental protections for a generation. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope this helped unpack the incredibly complex reality behind the headlines. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.